snow over Manhattan looked soft and harmless that Christmas night, settling on the rooftops like a white blanket over a restless city. From the windows of a high-rise on the Upper West Side, the lights of Central Park shimmered like a picture Grace Holloway might have saved as a screensaver years ago, when New York was still a dream instead of a trap. Inside the apartment, nothing felt soft. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, white lights blinking too fast, their reflection flickering in the glass coffee table. Wrapping paper lay open on the rug beside an unopened Amazon box, because Grace had been trying to wrap the last tiny pair of socks for the baby before her back started screaming at her to sit down. She shifted on the couch, one hand pressed against her lower spine, the other resting over the mound of her belly. The baby rolled and pushed, heavy and low. Her breath caught as a small cramp tightened across her abdomen, then faded. She told herself it was just another Braxton Hicks, the kind the nurse at her last appointment had said would feel scary but mean nothing. She checked the time on her iPhone again. 10:37 p.m. Preston was late. An hour earlier, he had texted something about a client dinner at the Ritz-Carlton, running long, big deal, can't leave yet, you know how it is. She had typed, come home soon. The baby misses you. Then erased that second sentence before it could make her look clingy. She had settled on, drive safe, and watched the typing dots appear, then vanish, then appear again, until finally he sent back a thumbs up. Grace had planned a small Christmas Eve for just the two of them. Take out on the couch, a movie they'd already seen 10 times, him joking about how she balanced a bowl of popcorn on her belly like a little table. He had promised, weeks ago, that this holiday would be calm, just them and the baby's kicks. But the apartment felt like a stage after the actors had gone home, the props still in place, the story forgotten. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed and faded. The heater clicked on and off with a tired sigh. Outside, the city sparkled. Inside, the silence pressed against her ears. Another cramp grabbed low and hard, sharper this time. Grace sucked in a breath, fingers digging into the couch cushion. She counted slowly like the nurse had shown her, in for 4, out for 6, until the pain faded into a dull ache. It's too early, she whispered, rubbing small circles over her skin. You stay put, okay? We're not ready yet. She thought of calling Preston. Imagined the way his voice would flatten, the way he would tell her not to be dramatic. That stress wasn't good for the baby, that clients came first, just for now. She set the phone back on the table. The front door lock clicked. Grace's heart jumped. She pushed herself up, legs unsteady, one hand gripping the edge of the coffee table. Water from the glass she'd forgotten to finish glimmered in a little ring on the surface, catching the Christmas lights. Preston, she called. The door swung open, letting in a slice of cold hallway air and bright fluorescent light. Preston stepped in first, his navy coat smelling of expensive cologne and hotel bar whiskey, his tie loosened, his hair perfectly in place. Behind him, a woman in a silver dress walked in like she owned the floor, laughing at something on her phone, the sound high and careless. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, sharp and steady. Grace stared. Her throat went dry. The woman didn't even look up. You said the car was waiting downstairs, the woman murmured, her voice low and intimate as if they were alone. Preston stiffened, then finally lifted his gaze. His eyes landed on Grace, on her swollen belly under the loose sweater, on the way she was holding the table to keep her balance. For a heartbeat, something close to guilt flickered across his face. Then it vanished. You're still up, he said, like she had done something wrong. The baby kicked so hard she gasped. The cramp came back, sharp and deep this time. As pain shot through her, she saw something move in the hallway, the shadow of an older man near the elevator, shoulders tense, a phone raised in his hand, as if he had been standing there for a long time, listening, waiting for the moment he finally had to step in, and the second Preston reached for her, that shadowed stranger silently hit record. Grace Holloway had always been good at pretending she belonged. As a child in Ohio, she learned early how to shrink into corners, how to smile when adults asked questions she didn't want to answer, how to stay quiet when the truth felt too heavy to carry. Her mother, Lorraine, raised her alone and never spoke a word about the man who had disappeared before Grace turned 3. Every time she asked about him, Lorraine would tighten her jaw and say, "Some people don't deserve to be remembered." And that was the end of it. Growing up, Grace convinced herself she didn't care. She filled the empty space with honor roll certificates, part-time jobs, and dreams bigger than her small two-bedroom rental. She'd sit in the public library until closing, flipping through magazines that showed the Manhattan skyline and glossy high-rise apartments like worlds she hoped were real. She'd whisper to herself, someday, imagining a life where she wouldn't have to worry about overdue bills or hand-me-down coats or a mother exhausted from double shifts. But the truth was simpler and sadder. She wanted a family. A real one. Not perfect, just present. In middle school, she tried to bond with relatives, an aunt who forgot her birthday every year, a cousin who made fun of her thrift store shoes, but connection rarely stuck. She kept reaching anyway, like a child knocking on every locked door, hoping one might open. It never did. By 17, she learned to bury hurt deep. By 22, she learned to bury it under achievements. She won a small scholarship, moved out of state, studied computer science, and told everyone she was fine, even when she wasn't. Loneliness followed her from campus to her first job, a quiet flat near San Francisco where she coded late into the night because silence felt safer than hope. Then came the phone call that broke whatever pieces of her childhood were still unbroken. Her mother was gone, sudden heart failure, no warning. Grace flew home, stood in the same living room where she'd once built cardboard forts, and realized there was no one left who truly knew her. At the funeral, a stranger handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sentence written in her mother's shaky handwriting. "Forgive me for the things I could not explain." Grace stared at those words for months. Forgive what? Explain what? Who? She searched old boxes for clues, scraps, anything. Nothing. Her past remained a locked door with no key. When she moved to New York 2 years later, she told herself she was starting fresh. New job, new city, new life. Still, she carried an ache she never named. And then she met Preston. He appeared at a tech networking mixer hosted in a glass-ceiling lounge overlooking the Hudson. He wasn't like the loud financial guys she'd overheard bragging about deals. He was calm, charming, attentive. He remembered her coffee order the second time they met. He bought her a scarf on a cold night just because. He made her feel chosen, something she hadn't felt since childhood. When he said, "You deserve stability," she believed him because she needed to. Looking back, she should have noticed the signs. The way he corrected her casually, the way he picked her outfits for fun, the way he discouraged her from visiting coworkers or traveling without him. But Grace had waited her whole life for someone to stay. She mistook control for care, intensity for love, routine for safety. And when Preston proposed, she didn't question the speed. She didn't question why he insisted on a small wedding, no extended family, no digging into her past. She said yes, grateful to finally belong to someone. But belonging, she would soon learn, could feel like captivity. And as snow fell outside their Manhattan apartment years later, with pain tightening through her abdomen and a stranger recording in the hallway, Grace's past began knocking again because the man watching from the shadows knew a truth about her childhood that would shatter everything she thought she understood. Grace met Preston Holloway on a rain-slick October evening in San Francisco, the kind where the wind pushed umbrellas sideways and everyone rushed the crosswalks with hunched shoulders. She had ducked into a tech networking event mostly for the free pastries, expecting to grab a name tag, shake 2 hands, then leave unnoticed. Instead, as she stood awkwardly near the refreshment table, Preston appeared beside her like he had been waiting for someone to save. He wore a charcoal coat, water still clinging to the sleeves, and he smiled with the confidence of a man who rarely heard the word no. "These events are torture, aren't they?" he joked, picking up a paper cup of coffee. "Everyone pretending they belong." Grace laughed, surprised he'd voiced the exact thought she was silently dying inside. They talked about their jobs, their long hours, the way California weather pretended to be gentle until it wasn't. He asked questions, real ones, and listened as if her answers mattered. That alone felt like sunlight after years of emotional winter. By the end of the night, he walked her to her rideshare and insisted she text him when she got home. It wasn't the words that hooked her, it was the tone. He sounded like someone who wanted to protect her. And Grace, carrying a lifetime of abandonment, slipped into that feeling like a warm coat. Their dating months moved fast. Too fast. Preston sent flowers to her tiny apartment just to brighten your Thursday. He offered to help her negotiate her next contract, claiming he understood finance better. He cooked for her, drove her to appointments, held her hand as if anchoring her to him. When he looked at her, she felt seen, not for her trauma or her achievements, but for something softer she had always hidden. But shadows existed beneath his impeccable gestures. He teased her outfits, telling her which colors did more for her shape. He encouraged her to cut people from her life, saying they didn't want the best for her. When she questioned him, he used warmth like a weapon, pulling her in close so she forgot why she felt uneasy. It was control wrapped in affection, and Grace, starved for belonging, mistook it for devotion. Within a year, he suggested moving to New York. "I want to give us a real future," he said, brushing his thumb along her jaw. "Manhattan is opportunity. You deserve stability." She heard only the promise, not the cage hidden inside it. They toured apartments online, though Preston always dismissed the ones she liked. "Trust me," he'd say. "I know what will make you comfortable." She ignored the tightening in her chest and followed him east. In Manhattan, he seemed even more polished, more confident, like the city was a stage built for him. Their new apartment soared above Central Park, glass walls reflecting a life she once dreamed of. But once the door closed, he monitored her spending, her schedule, her friendships. He made decisions before she had the chance to voice an opinion. Still, she stayed. She stayed because he held her after nightmares, because he whispered promises about marriage, because he knew how to make her feel chosen on the days she doubted her worth. And when he finally proposed, kneeling in their living room with the skyline glittering behind him, Grace said yes with tears in her eyes. She didn't see the calculation in his smile. She didn't notice he never mentioned a wedding date. She didn't ask why he insisted on controlling their finances. She didn't know what he was hiding on his password-locked MacBook. And she certainly didn't know that the night she discovered his secret would be the night her life cracked open, because the file she stumbled upon wasn't just incriminating, it tied Preston to someone she never expected to meet again. From the outside, the Upper West Side apartment Preston chose looked like a dream carved out of glass and light. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the living room, offering an unobstructed view of Central Park that shifted color with every hour. The kitchen gleamed with marble counters, a stainless steel fridge, and a row of pendant lights that made everything feel staged like a magazine home instead of a real one. When Grace first walked inside, her breath caught. She had grown up in a house where the heater rattled all winter and windows fogged from drafts. Now she stood in a place where silence felt expensive. "This is our next chapter," Preston had said, sliding a hand around her waist. "A space worthy of what we're building." Grace almost cried. She didn't notice he said "our" when choosing the apartment, but "my" when signing the lease. Every paper, every financial document, every monthly payment, Preston handled them all. "So you don't stress," he said. She believed him because she wanted to. In the beginning, the apartment sparkled with possibility. They cooked pasta late at night, they slow danced in the living room with jazz playing softly. They stood at the windows during thunderstorms, watching lightning trace the sky. But gradually, the space shifted. It started small. A comment about how she arranged the pantry, a correction on how she loaded the dishwasher, a note on the refrigerator reminding her not to order too many groceries. "We need discipline," he'd say, brushing her cheek with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then came the bigger changes. He discouraged her from working late for the baby's sake, then subtly monitored her hours. He asked why she needed lunch with coworkers when she had everything she needed here. Her world shrank without her noticing. When she bought a maternity sweater online, he questioned the price. When she ordered a second pair of shoes, he frowned. "We don't want to waste money on unnecessary things, sweetheart," he said, locking his gaze on hers until she felt genuinely ashamed. Still, she told herself she was lucky. She had a home she never imagined. Preston earned well. The baby kicked strong. Maybe this was what stability looked like: tidy, disciplined, predictable. But the apartment changed mood depending on Preston's temper. On good nights, he poured wine, which she declined during pregnancy, cooked dinner, and talked about promotions or future investments. Grace listened carefully, wanting to be supportive. On bad nights, he paced the living room, MacBook Pro open, arguing on the phone about liabilities, escrow leaks, and department audits. When she asked if everything was okay, he snapped, "Don't worry about things you don't understand." Gradually, Grace felt the walls closing in. The apartment that once felt like a dream began to feel like a luxury prison, beautiful but suffocating. She kept telling herself it was just pregnancy, hormones, or stress. But deep down, something whispered, "This is not love, this is control dressed in silk." One evening, while Preston showered after a tense phone call, Grace wandered into his home office. Her heart thudded. His desk light was still on, papers scattered like he'd left in a hurry. She noticed a folder labeled Fiscal Arbitration Confidential. She didn't touch it, but the sight alone chilled her. She turned toward the windows, trying to slow her breathing. The city glittered below, vibrant and alive, while she felt increasingly trapped inside a life curated by someone else. She reached over to straighten a stack of papers, and a small key slid off the edge, landing on the floor with a metallic tap. She frowned. She had never seen that key before. It was silver, engraved with a serial number, and attached to a tag labeled Deposit Box, Midtown Branch. Her pulse hammered. What deposit box? Why did Preston have it? Why had he never mentioned it? Before she could think, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Preston was leaving the shower earlier than usual. Panic surged. She shoved the key back exactly where she found it and hurried out of the office, heart pounding like she had stolen something. She didn't know it yet, but that tiny key was the first loose thread in Preston's carefully woven life, and pulling it would unravel a secret connecting him to someone she believed was long gone. The first real crack in Preston's polished exterior came on a Thursday night, one so ordinary that Grace later wondered how she hadn't sensed the storm building. She had made chili his favorite, hoping it would ease the tension that had lingered all week. Preston had been snappish, pacing, quick to anger. She figured work was stressful again, and she tiptoed around him, careful not to ask too much, careful not to breathe too loudly. He arrived home late, smelling faintly of whiskey and cold winter air. His jaw was tight, his hair slightly out of place, rare for him. Grace set down her spoon as he entered the kitchen, studying him with hopeful eyes. "Dinner's warm," she said softly. "Want me to fix you a bowl?" He didn't answer. Instead, he threw his coat across the counter, pulled his phone from his pocket, and slammed it face down. "Do you ever think before you act?" he growled. Grace blinked. "What? What happened?" "You ordered another set of baby pajamas." His tone dripped with accusation. "We talked about expenses, Grace." Her throat tightened. "It was a sale. And the baby? I don't care if it was free. I told you to be mindful." She swallowed the sting rising behind her eyes. It was pajamas, not $1,000 purchase. But arguing would only push him further. She'd long learned which words triggered him. He sank into a chair, rubbing his forehead. "You need to listen," he muttered. "Money is tight right now." That made her freeze. Money? Tight? Preston always boasted about his financial stability, his confidence, his deals. Then why the strain? Why the sudden anger over small purchases? Why the late nights? Why the deposit box key? "Are things okay at work?" she asked cautiously. He lifted his head slowly, his expression hardening as if he'd been insulted. "Don't pry into matters you don't understand." "I'm not prying. I'm worried." "Well, stop." He stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "If you want to help, stay in your lane." Her chest squeezed with humiliation. She turned off the stove, keeping her back to him so he wouldn't see her trembling. Behind her, Preston grabbed his MacBook Pro and retreated into his office, slamming the door. The apartment felt colder. The next day brought more cracks. Grace woke to an empty bed. From the hallway, she heard Preston speaking in a low, frantic whisper. She stepped quietly toward the sound, stopping just before the corner. "I told you it's handled," Preston hissed. "Don't call again. You want the feds looking at us? Keep your damn mouth shut." Grace's stomach dropped. "Feds?" She pressed a hand to her belly, as if shielding the baby from whatever threat lurked in Preston's words. He continued speaking, too soft for her to catch everything, but she heard fragments. Audit, paper trail, Harrison, and exposure. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Harrison. The name meant nothing to her, and yet something about the tone, the urgency, the fear, it chilled her. When Preston ended the call, she hurried to the kitchen and pretended she'd been making tea. He walked in, adjusting his tie, acting as if nothing had happened. "You're up early," he said, kissing the top of her head without warmth. "You too," she replied, forcing a smile. He grabbed his coat. I'll be home late, don't wait up. And with that, he left. Grace spent the rest of the morning pacing. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. She wanted to believe Preston's stress was temporary, that the man she loved still existed beneath the anger, the distance, the secrecy, but with every passing day, the illusion felt thinner. By afternoon, she made a decision. When Preston left his office earlier, he forgot to close a folder on his desk. She knew she shouldn't open it. But fear outweighed guilt. Heart-hammering, she stepped inside and lifted the cover. Inside were financial statements, ones that didn't add up. Wire transfers, large withdrawals, unexplained transactions under shell company names. Then her eyes landed on a printed email thread. Sender, P. Holloway. Recipient, S. Clark. Her breath stopped. Sienna. She scanned the messages. They weren't romantic. They were worse, strategic, cold, calculating. Discussions about timelines, coverage, making sure Grace didn't ask questions. She felt like the floor dropped from beneath her. And then she found a document with a signature that made her hands go numb. Harrison Vale. Why was Preston tied to a man she'd never met? Why did the name feel like a shadow waiting to swallow her? Her vision blurred as fear prickled her skin. She pressed a hand to her belly, whispering, "It's okay, baby, we're okay." But for the first time, Grace wasn't sure that was true, because the deeper she read, the clearer it became. Preston wasn't just hiding infidelity, he was hiding a crime that could destroy them both. Sienna Clark entered Grace's life long before Grace ever knew her name. She appeared first in whispers, passing mentions, vague references, subtle changes in Preston's behavior, but Sienna didn't become real until the night Grace found her name in the email thread. After that, the woman felt like a shadow moving silently through the apartment, leaving cold breezes and uneasy questions behind. Sienna wasn't someone Grace would have imagined Preston gravitating toward. Grace pictured his type as composed, intelligent, steady, but Sienna, based on the fragments Grace uncovered, was something else entirely: bold, reckless, dangerously ambitious. She worked in public relations for a well-known financial group downtown, the sort of firm that hosted rooftop parties overlooking the East River and expected its employees to be both beautiful and merciless. Grace clicked through the rest of the emails, her chest tightening with every message. The tone between Preston and Sienna was unsettling, not romantic, but conspiratorial. They exchanged coded messages about coverage gaps, media containment, and narratives. Often, Sienna sent Preston articles about corporate whistleblowing cases, followed by alarming notes like, "This could be us if she looks too closely." Grace. Her heart raced. It wasn't just infidelity, it was strategy. Manipulation. A plan she was never meant to discover. Later that afternoon, unable to stop her imagination from spiraling, Grace searched Sienna online. Her social media accounts were public, curated with glossy photos, cocktail dresses, rooftop sunsets, work events, a polished life captured through filters and confidence. She was stunning, the sort of woman who turned heads effortlessly. But there was something in her smile that unsettled. Grace too perfect, too sharp, like kindness edged with knives. Scrolling further, Grace found a photo posted just 3 nights earlier. Sienna in a silver dress, the same one she wore entering Grace's home that Christmas Eve. She stood beside Preston. Their proximity looked professional enough to outsiders, but Grace saw the subtle lean in Sienna's posture, the familiarity in Preston's smirk. Seeing it felt like a punch to the lungs. Her hands shook so hard, she nearly dropped her phone. She pressed a palm to her belly, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She wasn't sure who she was apologizing to, the baby, herself, or the life she once thought she had. The more she learned about Sienna, the worse the picture became. A former colleague of Sienna's had written a blog post years ago describing her as brilliant but venomous. Someone else commented underneath, "She knows which strings to pull and who to ruin." Another review hinted at unethical tactics, media manipulation, and a rumor about her destroying a coworker's career to climb a little higher. It wasn't gossip Grace wanted, it was confirmation. Preston wasn't just having an affair, he'd aligned himself with a woman who weaponized information for sport. Someone who understood reputational warfare. Someone who could help him bury secrets, including Grace. The realization made Grace feel physically ill. She remembered how Preston had become increasingly paranoid over the past month, how he checked the apartment cameras twice a day, how he grew agitated when mail arrived with unfamiliar names, how he snapped when she innocently asked about a voicemail from an unknown number. And now, seeing Sienna's involvement, the pieces clicked into place. They weren't afraid of Grace leaving. They were afraid of what Grace could expose. That night, Preston returned home unexpectedly early. Grace sat at the kitchen island with a cup of tea she didn't drink, trying to calm her breathing. Preston looked immaculate, fresh shirt, clean shave, not a trace of guilt on his face. "You look tired," he observed, studying her. "Are you feeling okay?" Grace forced a nod. "Just the baby. Long day." He walked toward her, placing a hand on her shoulder, his touch almost clinical. "You should rest more. Don't stress about unnecessary things." Unnecessary. The word stung. She wondered if he already knew she had found the emails. Had Sienna warned him? Were they watching her somehow? Her skin prickled with fear. Preston leaned in and kissed the top of her head. To anyone else, it might have looked caring. But Grace felt the pressure beneath it, a silent command to stay quiet. She barely breathed as he walked toward his office. The moment he closed the door, she allowed a single tear to fall, silent, heavy, burning, because now she finally understood something she had never dared to consider. Sienna wasn't just a mistress. She was Preston's accomplice, and together they were preparing for a future where Grace no longer existed in the picture at all. Grace hadn't intended to open Preston's MacBook. She knew better than to cross boundaries he guarded so obsessively. But after discovering the emails with Sienna, after hearing the whispered phone call about feds and exposure, the urge to know the truth gnawed at her like something alive. One quiet afternoon, while Preston showered after a morning meeting, Grace felt the apartment shift into an eerie stillness. The water ran behind the closed bathroom door, steady and distant. Her pulse quickened. She stood in the hallway, eyes fixed on the slightly ajar office door. The MacBook sat on his desk, screen asleep, lid open. Just looking at it made her stomach clench. "Don't," she whispered to herself. "Don't do this." But a voice deeper inside answered, "If you don't, he will destroy you." Her baby fluttered beneath her ribs, and the movement made her resolve sharpen. Slowly, carefully, she stepped into the office. Her hands trembled as she approached the desk. She sat down, breathed once, and tapped the trackpad. The screen lit up. "Password required." Of course. She closed her eyes, trying to think like Preston. He was arrogant, but not sloppy. What would he use? A phrase? A date? A name? On instinct, she typed Sienna. Incorrect. Then, P. Holloway. Incorrect. Her heart pounded. She tried again: his birthday, his old zip code, a previous job title, nothing. She was about to give up when she remembered something small, so insignificant she never questioned it. The way he touched her stomach every night before bed, whispering a name he had chosen long before Grace agreed. A name she didn't love, but endured. She typed, Anderson 2024. The screen unlocked. Grace's breath vanished. Folders filled the desktop, dozens of them. Arbitration, Federal Review, Media Holding, Vail Records, Shell Invoices, Clark Strategies. Everything felt sterile, coded, not the files of an innocent man. Not even the files of a guilty man trying to hide something. These were the files of someone preparing for war. She clicked the folder labeled Vail Records, the same name she found in the office earlier, Harrison Vail. Her heart thudded. She didn't recognize the name, but something inside her tightened, as if her body did. Inside the folder were scanned documents, legal memos, court transcripts, investigative reports, and then a birth certificate. Grace froze. Her own birth certificate. She blinked, breath shaking, unsure if her eyes were deceiving her. Why did Preston have that? How did he get it? She scrolled further and found a sealed adoption form unsigned. Then a set of photos, pictures of her as a child, ones she had never seen. One with her mother holding her at a playground. Another of Grace at age 5, standing beside a man whose face had been digitally blurred. A chill crawled down her spine. She clicked the final file. Vail. Statement. PDF. It opened to a single-page document stamped with a federal seal. Harrison Vail, former federal judge, forced resignation, pending investigation. Her eyes scanned the text. He had disappeared from public life nearly 30 years ago. Rumors indicated he fled due to threats linked to a financial corruption case, a case involving the same corporation Preston now worked for. Her fingers trembled violently. Why did Preston care about this? What connection did he have to the man her mother never spoke of? She scrolled down and saw a handwritten note, Preston's handwriting. If Grace ever learns the truth, everything collapses. Keep Sienna close. Use the narrative. Her father is the key. Grace pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a cry. Her father. The word hit her like thunder. Her mother's letter, the unanswered questions, the man she never knew, all of it collided in a dizzying wave. Was Harrison Vale her father? Was Preston tracking him? Was Sienna helping him? Her vision blurred as fear surged through her bloodstream. Suddenly, the water stopped running. She jerked upright. Preston. Her hands flew to the trackpad, closing windows, backing out, shutting the lid. She stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. Heart pounding, she hurried out of the office and slipped into the living room just as the bathroom door opened. Preston emerged, toweling his hair, eyes narrowed as they landed on her. "What are you doing?" he asked slowly. Grace forced a smile, gripping the edge of the couch to steady herself. "Just looking for a snack." His gaze lingered on her too long. Too sharp. Too suspicious. And Grace realized, with a terror that hollowed her out from the inside, if he ever discovered how much she now knew, she wouldn't just lose her marriage, she could lose her life. The days after discovering the files on Preston's MacBook were the longest, tightest days of Grace's life. Every breath felt measured, every step rehearsed, every word filtered through fear. She moved carefully through the apartment, her own home, like a deer navigating a forest where the wolves pretended to sleep. She couldn't let Preston know she had seen anything. She couldn't let Sienna suspect she was catching on. She couldn't let panic betray her. But most of all, she couldn't risk harming the baby. She practiced steady breathing whenever her mind spiraled. She placed her hand on her stomach often, grounding herself, whispering silent promises. "I will protect you. I won't let them win." Yet inside, she felt the walls closing in. Preston's behavior shifted subtly. Not dramatically enough to raise alarms, but enough that Grace sensed he was watching her more closely. Their conversations felt staged, as if every word from him carried a hidden test. Every smile felt thin. Every question felt like a probe. "How are you feeling today?" he'd ask, his eyes not on her face but on her reactions. "Any strange calls? Anyone contacted you from your old hometown? Thinking of visiting anyone after the baby comes?" Each question wrapped in fake tenderness. Grace lied smoothly, terrified that truth would slip out. At night, he held her the same way he always had, arm over her waist, breath soft against her neck, but the warmth she once felt was gone. In its place grew a coldness that made her skin crawl. She didn't dare sleep deeply. She didn't dare leave the apartment when he was home. She didn't dare show the slightest fear, because Preston thrived on fear. He sensed it, fed on it, controlled it. And now that he sensed her pulling away, his claws subtly tightened. On the third night, she made a mistake. She woke with a sharp cramp in her lower belly, strong enough to make her gasp. It wasn't the first one that week, but this one lasted longer. She shifted quietly, trying not to wake him. But the movement stirred him. Preston rolled over, his hand sliding across her belly. "You okay?" he murmured. Grace froze, forcing steady breathing. "Just a little discomfort. Normal." He hummed, half asleep, and rested his hand heavier on her. She felt trapped beneath the weight of it, trapped beneath the man who could smile in public, charm an entire boardroom, then plot behind her back like she was nothing more than collateral. She stared at the ceiling, wide awake, until his breathing deepened again. Then she slipped out of bed and into the living room, padding softly to the couch. She lowered herself slowly, pressing a hand to her abdomen, waiting for the ache to ease. Minutes later, another cramp radiated through her body. She inhaled sharply. "No, not yet," she whispered. "Please, not yet." She knew stress could trigger preterm contractions. She knew fear wasn't good for the baby, but how could she not be terrified when living in a house built on lies? As the pain subsided, tears slid silently down her cheeks. She wasn't just fighting for truth anymore. She was fighting for survival. The next morning brought a different kind of tension. Preston stood by the window with his phone pressed to his ear, back stiff, tone icy. No, I don't care what she thinks, he snapped quietly. Just do your part. When the time comes we move, I'll handle her. Grace's heart pounded. Her. She knew exactly who he meant. She stepped back into the hallway before he noticed her, swallowing the rising panic. She needed a plan, something that would allow her to escape without alerting him. But where could she go? She had no family, no savings, no one she could trust. Except, her mind flashed back to the name in the files. Harrison Vale. Her breath trembled. If he truly was her father, if he truly had been watching her life from the shadows, then maybe, just maybe, he was the one person capable of helping her. But tracking him down on her own was impossible. Preston had eyes everywhere, and Sienna had influence in media spaces Grace couldn't even understand. Still, the thought planted a seed, a small flame of hope flickering in her darkness. She placed a hand over her stomach. "We'll find a way," she whispered. That evening, something happened that made her blood run cold. A notification buzzed on her phone, an email, sent anonymously. No subject, no message, just one attached image. Her birth certificate, the same document she found inside Preston's Vale Records folder. Grace's fingers shook violently as she stared at the screen. Someone was warning her, or threatening her, or watching her every move. The apartment door clicked. She jumped. Preston walked in, smiling too wide, carrying takeout as if they were a normal couple expecting a normal baby in a normal world. And Grace, heart hammering, phone still warm in her hand, realized something chilling. The silent war inside their glass apartment wasn't silent anymore. Someone else had entered the battlefield, and she didn't know if they were there to save her or destroy her. For the rest of the evening, Grace couldn't eat. She pushed noodles back and forth across her plate while Preston talked about a board presentation he had single-handedly saved, his voice annoyingly self-satisfied. She nodded in the right places, smiled when expected, but her mind churned around the anonymous email. Who sent it? How did they know what she saw? And why send it now? Her birth certificate was not something anyone should have access to, not without intent, not without purpose. And the timing was too perfect to be accidental. As Preston washed up after dinner, she slipped into the hallway, leaning against the cool wall to steady herself. She unlocked her phone and tapped the image again. Nothing unusual, just the birth certificate. But the fact it had been sent meant someone was close, close enough to know what Preston kept hidden, close enough to know the danger she was in. Her pulse quickened. There was one person who made sense. One person who had been watching from a distance. One person whose name appeared in those files. Harrison Vale. Her breath shook as she whispered it. The name felt heavy, like truth pressing against her ribs. There had been moments, fleeting ones throughout her life, where she sensed someone was there without seeing them. A man at her mother's funeral who stood too far away to be a friend. A figure she noticed once at a coffee shop when she still lived in San Francisco. A stranger on the subway platform in New York who disappeared when she glanced back. She always assumed she was imagining it. Now she wasn't so sure. The next morning, as Preston prepared for work, he seemed distracted, restless, checking his watch every few minutes. He kissed her forehead before leaving, but his lips barely touched her skin. "I'll be home late," he muttered. Grace nodded. "Be safe." He paused in the doorway. "You too." Something in his tone made her stomach twist. He said it like a warning, not a wish. When he finally left, she exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She waited exactly 10 minutes, enough time for the elevator to reach the lobby, for the doorman to exchange pleasantries, for Preston to step out into the cold and disappear into the city. Then she grabbed her coat, slipped on her boots, and reached for her purse. She needed air, she needed clarity, she needed... A soft ding sounded outside the door. Grace froze. Someone was on her floor. Her heart thudded painfully. Preston had just left. He wouldn't return this soon. Sienna wouldn't dare show up without him. She tiptoed to the peephole and pressed her eye to the glass. An older man stood in the hallway, facing the apartment across from hers. Tall, silver-haired, shoulders slightly hunched from age but still strong. His coat, dark wool, elegant but worn, suggested someone who had once lived a different kind of life. One hand gripped a cane, though he didn't seem to lean on it. The other held his phone. Grace's breath caught. She knew that profile. She had seen it before. In memories she didn't realize were memories. He turned and she stumbled back from the peephole. Harrison Vale. Her father. the man who vanished from her life before she turned 3, the man whose face she barely remembered except in blurs and fragments, the man whose name she now knew terrified Preston. Her pulse roared in her ears. Should she open the door? Should she hide? Should she call for help? Before she could decide, the hallway fell silent. She risked another glance. He was gone. Grace's chest tightened, panic surged. What if Preston found him first? What if Sienna was nearby? What if this, her father appearing here, now was the start of something dangerous? She backed away from the door, clutching her belly as the baby rolled uncomfortably. Stress tightened her abdomen again, sharp and low. She breathed through it, whispering reassurances. But then, a soft rustle came from under the door. An envelope. Someone had slid it through the gap. Grace stared at it, shaking. Slowly, she bent down, picked it up, and unfolded the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key. The key to a safety deposit box. Her heart pounded as she read the note, just 5 words, written in careful script. "You're not safe with him." Her knees nearly buckled. Her father had been here. He'd seen enough to risk exposing himself. He knew Preston was dangerous, and he had given her the same key she had seen days earlier in Preston's office. The room spun, fear and relief colliding in her chest. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, steadying herself. Because now she knew 2 terrifying truths. 1, Preston wasn't just hiding crimes. 2, her father was no longer watching from afar. He was stepping into the war. Christmas Eve had always meant quiet warmth to Grace, soft lights, simple meals, her mother humming old songs while snow dusted their windows. She never imagined her own Christmas Eve would unfold in a penthouse of glass, filled not with love, but with danger thick enough to choke on. The day began tensely. Grace didn't dare leave the apartment after finding the envelope and key from her father. She hid it behind a loose vent panel in the guest room, her hands shaking the whole time. The message, "You're not safe with him," echoed through her skull like a warning bell she couldn't silence. All morning she tried to rest, but her body worked against her. The stress brought waves of tightening across her belly, each sharper than the last. She forced deep breaths, drank water, walked slowly around the apartment. Eventually the contractions eased. She whispered to her baby, promising safety she wasn't sure she could give. Just after sunset, Preston texted, "Running late? Don't wait to eat." No heart emoji, no explanation. Grace swallowed the dread rising in her throat. She placed her hand over her belly. "Just one peaceful night," she whispered. "Just one." She decorated the tree as a distraction. She plugged in the string lights, their glow warm and soothing. She placed the last ornament, a tiny ceramic star, on the highest branch she could reach. For a moment, the silence felt gentle again, until the elevator dinged. She stiffened. Footsteps approached 2 sets, not 1. She felt it before she heard the voices. Preston's low, tense murmur. A woman's bright laugh. Grace's stomach dropped. No, not tonight, not here. The door swung open, and there stood Preston, coat unbuttoned, eyes glassy from drinking. And beside him, Sienna, in the same silver dress from the photo. The same dress she wore the first moment Grace saw her in person. Her perfume reached the room before she did, sharp and sweet, filling the space like poison. Grace felt the world tilt. "What is she doing here?" Grace whispered. Preston didn't blink. "We stopped for a drink. It's not a big deal." "A drink?" Grace repeated, voice trembling. "It's Christmas Eve." Sienna lifted a brow, strolling into the apartment as if she owned it. "Relax, Grace. We brought wine. Let's not ruin the holiday." Grace's breath caught. She steadied herself on the back of the couch. Her belly tightened painfully, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "I don't want you here." Sienna's smirk sharpened. "Well, he does." Grace looked at Preston. Really looked. He wasn't just indifferent, he was cruelly calm, as if he'd been waiting for this confrontation. "Preston," she said, "why are you doing this?" He shrugged, loosening his tie. "You've been unpredictable lately. Emotional. I thought having someone else around might ease the tension." Tears stung her eyes. "I'm 8 months pregnant, Preston, and you brought your mistress into our home." Sienna laughed softly. Mistress is such an old-fashioned word. Grace felt the room cracking beneath her feet. She shook her head. "Get out." Instead of obeying, Preston stepped closer, too close, his expression hardening. "Don't raise your voice," he warned. I'm not. Yes, you are. His jaw tightened. You've been on edge for weeks. I'm tired of tiptoeing around you. Grace felt something inside her break. Tiptoeing? You've been lying to me, hiding things, working with her, planning something. Preston's eyes darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. But Grace did know. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to show it. I know about the files, she whispered. I know about the deposit box. I know about Harrison. Preston lunged. Not fast, not dramatic, but with a suddenness that made her stumble backward. His hand clamped around her arm, squeezing hard enough to send pain shooting up her shoulder. What did you say? He hissed. Let go, she gasped. But he squeezed harder. Hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to hurt the baby. Sienna watched, frozen not out of fear, but fascination. Grace's knees buckled. Pain ripped through her belly, so sharp she cried out. Preston's grip loosened as she collapsed to the floor. Her water broke. The warm rush soaked through her clothes, pooling around her knees. Oh my God, Sienna whispered. Is she? Grace clawed at the floorboards, breath ragged, vision blurring. The contraction hit like a freight train, longer and stronger than any before. Preston stepped back, panic flickering across his face before anger smothered it. You're doing this on purpose, he snapped. You always need attention. Grace screamed as another contraction tore through her. And out in the hallway, unseen by all three, a shadow moved. A man stood there. Older, gray-haired, eyes burning with fury. Harrison Vale. Her father, the ghost she thought she'd imagined. Phone in hand. Recording. Calling for help. Finally stepping out of the shadows. And Grace, barely conscious, understood. This was the night her life would change forever, because the man who'd abandoned her long ago had returned at the exact moment she needed him most. Grace collapsed sideways onto the hardwood floor, her breath breaking into sharp, shallow gasps. The warm flood beneath her spread quickly, and the contractions, wild, uncontrollable, tore through her like lightning. The Christmas lights blinked beside her, cheerful and oblivious, reflecting off the pool of amniotic fluid gathering around her legs. Her vision blurred, her hands clawed for something, anything to hold on to. But she wasn't prepared for what happened next. Sienna pulled out her phone. Not to call 911, not to help, but to record. People need to see what's happening, Sienna said, her voice shaking with excitement, not fear. Just in case she spins a story later. Grace stared, horrified. Stop, please, help me. Sienna angled her phone lower, stepping closer. She's hysterical. See? Completely unstable. Preston didn't stop her. He didn't even look at Grace, he paced instead, running a hand through his hair, muttering curses under his breath. This isn't happening. Not tonight. Not like this. Another contraction gripped Grace, so strong she cried out, her hands shaking violently. Her body felt like it was breaking open, pulling her into a world she wasn't ready for. Preston, she gasped. Please, call someone. He whirled around, anger flaring. Stop telling me what to do. Grace flinched. Every shout sent another wave of terror through her body. Sienna zoomed in her camera. Preston, this could actually work in your favor. If she gives birth like this, no one will blame you for wanting custody. Grace's heart cracked. She was in labor, terrified, hurting, alone. And the man she once trusted with her life now looked at her like she was a problem he wished he could delete. Look at her, Sienna said, circling like a vulture. This is what instability looks like. Grace forced her trembling hands to push herself upright, but her legs buckled. The baby wasn't just coming. The baby was coming fast. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Just call for help. Sienna smirked. I'll call when Preston tells me to. Preston stood at a distance, jaw tight, fists clenched. Not approaching. Not helping. Just calculating, his eyes darting between Grace, the spreading puddle, and the phone in Sienna's hand. He was choosing his reputation over her life. Another contraction hit sharp, deep, relentless. Grace screamed, her voice echoing against the high ceilings. From the hallway, muffled voices stirred. Someone must have heard. Then, a sound cut through the chaos. A loud knock, followed by another. Then a voice, firm and controlled. Preston Holloway, open the door. Preston froze. Sienna lowered her phone. Grace's heart thudded. The voice came again, closer, angrier. Open the door, or I will break it down." Preston swore under his breath. "Who the hell?" Before he could finish, the door burst open. Harrison Vale stormed in. Not as a ghost. Not as a shadow, but as a man ready to wage war. His presence filled the room, tall, authoritative, eyes blazing. He held his phone upright, recording everything, his jaw tight with controlled fury. Sienna stumbled back. Who is this?" Harrison ignored her. He dropped to his knees beside Grace, his coat sweeping across the floor as he cupped her trembling face. His voice softened instantly. "Grace, sweetheart, I'm here, I'm right here," Grace sobbed. She didn't question how he knew her name. She didn't question why he was here. Her body was in too much agony, her mind too fractured. "Help me," she choked out. "I've already called an ambulance," he assured her. "They're minutes away." Preston stepped forward. "You can't just break into my home." Harrison rose to his full height, eyes locked on Preston with a power that made the room seem smaller. "You put your hands on a pregnant woman," Harrison said, voice trembling with righteous rage. "My daughter. And I have all of it on camera." Grace's breath stopped. "Daughter." Preston stiffened. "You're Harrison Vale?" Harrison stepped closer, lowering his cane like a warning. "And you, Preston, are finished." Sienna swallowed hard. "Turn off the recording. Now." Harrison didn't even glance her way. "Take one more step toward her," he said, voice dropping into a deadly calm, "and I promise you won't see the inside of another boardroom again." For the first time, Sienna backed up. Grace cried out again as another contraction hit. Harrison dropped to her side instantly, gripping her hand. And as she clung to him in agony, another wave of clarity washed over her. Everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. Her husband was dangerous. Her father was alive. And the world she'd built was collapsing. And yet somehow, for the first time, she wasn't collapsing alone. The sound of sirens grew louder, echoing through the glass walls of the high-rise like a promise one Grace clung to with every ragged breath. Her body convulsed again, pain rippling through her so fiercely she could hardly see. Harrison squeezed her hand, grounding her, steady but trembling with emotion he had held back for nearly 3 decades. "Stay with me, Grace," he murmured, voice thick. "Help is almost here." Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. "It hurts. Dad, it hurts." The word "dad," soft, instinctive, hit him like a blow. His lips parted, eyes shining with grief and awe. For a second, his mask of control cracked. He brushed a trembling thumb across her forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere again." Behind them, Sienna hovered near the kitchen island, clutching her phone like a shield. She kept glancing at the door, at Preston, at the hallway, calculating escape routes. Her previous confidence had drained, replaced with coiled panic. "Preston," she hissed under her breath. "We need to get our story straight." "Shut up," Preston snapped. But he wasn't just angry, he was unraveling. Harrison's appearance, the recording, the way Grace whispered "Dad," it all cracked the last layer of his composure. His hands shook, his breathing quickened. "Give me your phone," he said to Sienna quietly. "What? No. Why?" "I said give it to me." He lunged for it, grabbing her wrist. Sienna yelped, jerking away. Her phone slipped from her fingers and skidded across the floor, landing near Grace. The screen was still on. Still recording. Still live. Grace's stomach lurched. "Sienna," Harrison growled. "Were you live streaming this?" Sienna backed up, palms raised. "It wasn't. Look, people lie all the time about domestic situations. I was protecting us." "Protecting yourselves?" Harrison barked. "By filming a woman in labor? On the floor? After her husband shoved her?" Sienna's face twisted. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," he thundered. Preston pointed a shaking finger at Harrison. "You don't get to walk in here and act righteous. You abandoned her. You destroyed your career and left Lorraine to raise—" "Don't you say her name," Harrison warned, his voice trembling with decades of buried guilt. Before Preston could retort, Grace gasped, arching forward as another contraction slammed through her. Her scream cut through the tension like a siren itself. Harrison dropped to her side again. "Breathe, Grace. You're doing so well." Her nails dug into his coat sleeve. "Dad, I'm scared." He cupped her cheek. "I know, but I'm here, and I won't let anything happen to you or the baby." A pounding shook the door. "Paramedics." Harrison shouted, "Come in." 2 EMTs rushed in with a stretcher, equipment bags, and calm efficiency. They knelt beside Grace, asking rapid questions she struggled to answer. They checked her vitals, examined the fluid on the floor, and exchanged a grave look. "She's in active labor," one EMT said. "We need to move her now." Grace whimpered as they lifted her carefully. Preston stepped forward. "Wait, I'm her husband." The EMT put up a hand. "Sir, step back. We need space." Harrison's eyes burned. "You heard them." Preston glared. "I'm coming with her." "No," Harrison snapped. "You're staying right here, with the police." As if summoned by the words, 2 NYPD officers appeared in the doorway behind the EMTs. "Which one of you is Preston Holloway?" the officer asked. Preston stiffened. "Why?" "We received an anonymous report and a video link regarding potential domestic assault." Sienna blanched. "Anonymous? Who?" Her eyes darted to her fallen phone, the live stream still running. Harrison's gaze followed. "Looks like your own recording turned against you." Preston lunged for the phone, but an officer stepped in front of him. "Sir, back up." One EMT leaned toward Grace. "We're taking you to Mount Sinai. Stay with me, okay?" Grace nodded weakly as they rolled her toward the door. "Dad," she whispered, reaching out. Harrison grabbed her hand, walking beside the stretcher. "I'm right here. I'm not leaving your side again." Preston's voice erupted behind them. "Grace, don't you dare leave with him. I'm your husband." Grace turned her head, tears streaming down her face, not from pain this time, but from truth finally cutting free. Her voice shook. "You stopped being my husband the moment you put your hands on me." Preston froze, the color draining from his face. And Harrison pushed the stretcher forward as the EMTs guided her into the hallway, away from the violence, away from the lies, away from the home that was never a home. As the elevator doors slid closed, Grace caught one last glimpse of the man who had terrorized her for months, being surrounded by police. And Sienna shaking like she finally understood her downfall was unfolding live. And then the doors shut. For the first time in years, Grace breathed without fear, unaware that at the hospital, another fight for life was waiting for her. The ambulance sliced through Manhattan traffic, sirens splitting the cold Christmas Eve air. Grace lay strapped to the gurney, her face pale under the harsh interior lights, sweat beaded along her hairline. Every few seconds, another contraction seized her, pulling a cry from her throat. Harrison sat beside her, gripping the rail with one hand and her trembling fingers with the other. He looked nothing like the composed, distant man she had imagined all her life. His jaw clenched, eyes glassy, breath shallow. He was terrified. "Stay with me, sweetheart," he said, brushing hair from her face. "You're strong. You're going to get through this." Grace tried to nod, but another wave of pain crashed through her. "Dad, the baby, is something wrong?" One EMT leaned closer. "Your blood pressure is high, and contractions are close together. We're getting you there as fast as we can." Grace squeezed her father's hand. "Please don't let them take my baby." Harrison's throat tightened. "No one is taking anything from you, not anymore." But deep down, fear gnawed at him. Preterm labor was always risky, but under this much stress, with no prenatal team prepared, his daughter and grandchild were fighting odds he couldn't control. And control was something Harrison Vale had always clung to until the day he lost his entire career protecting her mother. Now, watching Grace writhe in pain, he knew he would willingly lose everything again if it meant saving her. The ambulance burst through the hospital bay doors. Nurses rushed out, pushing another bed toward the vehicle. "Grace Holloway, 32 weeks gestation," one called. "Yes," the EMT answered. "Ruptured membranes, contractions every 2 minutes, elevated BP, and recent physical trauma." Physical trauma. The words stabbed Harrison through the chest. As they transferred her onto the hospital bed, Grace cried out, clutching her belly. "Dad, don't leave me." "I'm right here," Harrison whispered. But the nurse stepped between them. "Sir, we need to take her to labor and delivery. You'll have to wait." "The hell I will," Harrison snapped, his voice shaking with fury and fear. "She needs me." A calmer nurse touched his arm. "She'll be in good hands, I promise. As soon as we stabilize her, we'll bring you in." Grace's fingers slipped from his as they wheeled her away down a bright white hallway. Her cries echoed until a set of double doors swallowed them. Harrison stood rooted. The hallway spun. His cane trembled in his grip. He had been helpless once before with her mother. He refused to be helpless again. Minutes ticked like hours in the waiting room. Families talked quietly. A Christmas tree blinked softly in the corner. A TV whispered holiday commercials no one paid attention to. Harrison paced. His mind replayed everything: the live stream, the shove, the terror in Grace's eyes. He should have acted sooner. He should have intervened years ago. He should have told her who he was. But hiding had seemed safer. For her, for him, now he saw how wrong he'd been. A doctor finally approached a woman in blue scrubs, mask lowered around her neck. "You're the father?" she asked gently. Harrison nodded, gripping his cane so tightly his knuckles whitened. "How is she?" "How's the baby?" "She's stable," the doctor said, "for now. But she's in active labor, and the stress triggered complications. We're monitoring both closely." "Complications?" Harrison's voice wavered. "She's losing blood faster than we want, and the baby's heart rate is fluctuating." Harrison's knees nearly buckled. "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "Only for a moment. She's asking for you." They led him into a dimly lit room, where monitors beeped steadily. Grace lay on the bed, cheeks wet with tears, oxygen tubing under her nose. Her hands gripped the rails as another contraction surged. Her eyes opened when she sensed him. "Dad," she whispered. He rushed to her side, taking her hand. "I'm here. I'm right here." "I'm scared," she sobbed. "What if I lose him? What if Preston wins? What if?" "Listen to me," he said, voice firm, cracking. "You are not losing anything tonight. Not your baby, not your freedom. And Preston, he's already losing. The police are questioning him right now." Grace blinked, tears sliding down her temples. "Really?" "Yes." Harrison leaned close. "I sent the live stream link to the detectives myself." A weak laugh bubbled from her, half pain, half disbelief. I can't believe he would hurt me like that." Harrison stroked her hair, guilt tearing at him. "I failed you once. I will not fail you again." Another contraction ripped through her body. She screamed, arching off the bed. The monitors spiked. The doctor rushed back in. "She's progressing fast. We need to prep for delivery." Nurses flooded the room. Harrison squeezed her hand tighter, voice breaking. "Grace, sweetheart, hold on. Your baby is coming. And I'm not leaving this time, not for anything." She turned her face toward him, eyes wide with fear and trust. "Don't let me go, Dad." He bent down and kissed her forehead. "Never." And as the room spun into controlled chaos, as the team fought to keep mother and child safe, Grace clung to the one truth she had waited her entire life to feel. She wasn't alone anymore. And this time, someone was fighting for her. When consciousness finally returned, it did so gently, too gently, like the world was trying to cushion a blow it knew would devastate her. Grace blinked up at a dim hospital ceiling. The lights were softer now, humming faintly. A blanket warmed her chest. Her limbs felt heavy, distant, as if they belonged to someone else. For a moment, she didn't remember. Then, everything hit her at once. The contractions, the fall, the shouting, Harrison's face, the stretcher, and the baby. Her hand shot instinctively to her stomach. Flat, empty. Her breath caught in her throat. "Your baby," she whispered, panic rising like fire. "Where's my baby? Where?" "Grace?" A warm voice came from her right. She turned to see a man in navy scrubs, dark hair, steady eyes, a stethoscope hooked lightly around his neck. His presence radiated calm, the kind that felt earned rather than performed. "I'm Dr. Evan Mercer," he said softly. "I've been overseeing your care." "My baby," she gasped, gripping the bedrail. "Please tell me he's alive." Dr. Mercer pulled a chair closer, sitting right beside her, so she wouldn't feel alone. "He's alive," he said. "He's in the NICU. He's small, but he's fighting, and he's responding well to the interventions." Grace's body sagged with relief so intense it made her dizzy. Tears slipped down her temples, soaking the pillow beneath her head. "But," Dr. Mercer added gently, "he's not out of danger yet. Preterm births at 32 weeks come with challenges. But your son is strong." He came out crying. "That's a good sign." A sob escaped her, a sound filled with gratitude and fear all tangled together. "I want to see him," she whispered fiercely. "Please, I need to see him." "You will," Evan said. "Soon." But your blood pressure spiked after delivery, and we had to stabilize you first. You lost more blood than we wanted. You need rest before we move you." Rest. The word felt foreign. Impossible. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked. "A few hours." A few hours. Her baby had been fighting for his life for hours without her. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. Her chest tightened with the memory of Preston's face, cold, calculating, watching her fall as if she were collapsing on purpose. "Does he know I'm here?" she asked quietly. "Preston." A shadow crossed Dr. Mercer's expression. "The police have restricted his access to the maternity wing. There's an active investigation." "Good." Her voice cracked. Evan hesitated. "I also spoke with the man who brought you in, Harrison. He hasn't left the waiting room." Grace swallowed hard. He says he's my father." Evan nodded gently. "He does, and he seems deeply remorseful, protective, and absolutely committed to keeping you safe." Her breath trembled. She didn't know how to process that. She didn't know how to hold anger and longing at the same time. "Let him in," she whispered. Evan stood. "I'll bring him." As soon as the door closed, the silence became thick with everything she hadn't said, everything she needed to face. She lifted a hand to her cheek, feeling the dried tear tracks there. She wasn't the same woman she had been yesterday. Something had broken. Something new was forming in its place. The door opened again. Harrison stepped in slowly, his face etched with exhaustion and fear he didn't bother to hide. The moment his eyes met hers, his chin quivered. "Grace," he whispered. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to reconcile 3 decades of absence with the man who had carried her into the ambulance, held her hand through contractions, and shouted at police officers on her behalf. "Why didn't you come sooner?" she choked out. His eyes flooded. He came to her bedside, kneeling as if he wasn't worthy to stand above her. "I wanted to," he said. "Every day for 30 years, I wanted to. But I was being hunted, sweetheart. If I came near you, you and your mother would have been targets." Grace's breath hitched. "Targets for what?" "For the same men Preston works with," Harrison said softly. "The same men who tried to ruin me. Preston didn't choose you because he loved you, Grace. He chose you because of me." The words were, knives slow, deliberate, cruel in their truth. Grace turned her face away, tears slipping silently. "So, all of this, everything, it started long before I even knew him." "Yes," Harrison whispered, "but you are not defined by his choices. And neither is your son. You are here. You survived. And you will rise from this." For a moment, neither spoke. The room pulsed with grief and revelation. Finally, Grace exhaled, trembling. "I want to see my baby." "I'll push your chair," Harrison said, voice breaking. "If you'll let me." She turned her head toward him fully. "I need you to," she whispered. Harrison covered his face with one shaking hand, relief, guilt, and love crashing into him, and then he stood to get the nurse. Grace closed her eyes again, just for a moment, feeling a strange, fragile strength starting to settle inside her. Because even though her world had shattered, she knew now that the pieces could still become something stronger. When the nurses finally wheeled Grace into the NICU, the world shrank into a quiet symphony of beeping monitors, soft overhead lights, and tiny breaths fighting to stay in rhythm. The room felt sacred, suspended between fear and hope. Rows of incubators held infants so small they barely seemed real, little fists, fragile lungs, determined hearts. Her baby, her son, lay inside one of them. He was smaller than she imagined. His skin flushed pink under the warm glow, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow movements. Tiny wires connected him to machines that hummed a lullaby of survival. Grace's breath caught. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears surged freely. Oh my God." A nurse stepped closer. "He's doing well, considering the circumstances. He's a fighter." Harrison stood behind Grace's wheelchair, steadying her trembling shoulders. She reached out a hand toward the glass, afraid to touch, afraid she might shatter if she tried. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "Mommy's here." Her voice broke. Dr. Evan Mercer appeared beside her, hands tucked into the pockets of his white coat. His presence brought an odd calm to the room, something warm and unwavering. The kind of presence you trusted before you understood why. "Grace," he said gently, "he stabilized another 2 points since you woke up. That's a good trend." She swallowed hard. Will Will he make it? Evan knelt beside her, making sure their eyes met. Your son is strong. He has every chance. But he needs rest, steady oxygen, and for you to heal too. Grace wiped her cheeks. I can't leave him. You won't, Evan said, but you also need strength to take care of him when he comes home. That means food, water, sleep. She looked at him, really looked, and realized something about him eased the tightness inside her chest. Maybe it was his steady tone, maybe the way he never rushed her, maybe the simple truth that he had been there when her world collapsed. He stayed with her now, quietly explaining each monitor, each tube, each number on the screen. He told her what was normal, what wasn't, and what they'd be watching for. His patience wrapped around her like a blanket she didn't realize she needed. At one point, Grace whispered, "Do you see a lot of situations like mine?" Evan shook his head. "Not like yours. Yours was—" He paused, choosing a careful, respectful word. "Severe." She closed her eyes. Preston's shout echoed in her mind. Sienna's phone, the shove, the fall, the pain. Her body tensed. Evan noticed. "You're safe here." Grace nodded, though her heart still trembled. "I just want my son to grow up safe, loved, not in the middle of all this." Evan's expression softened. "He will, because you're his mother." Her throat tightened. "What if I'm not enough?" "You survived a man who tried to break you," Evan said quietly, "and you protected your baby through all of it. That's more than enough." His words hit deeper than he knew. She felt something shift inside her, a tiny space of belief opening where despair had lived. Harrison touched her shoulder gently. "Grace. He needs a name." She looked at her baby, tiny but fighting, and thought of everything stolen from her, her safety, her peace, her choices, and everything she was reclaiming now. "I'll name him Noah," she whispered, "because he survived the storm." Both men, her father and her doctor, exhaled softly, honored witnesses to the moment. Noah, her son, her reason to rise again. Evan smiled, warm, genuine. Noah is perfect. For a long moment, they stood in a fragile triangle of new beginnings. Grace, finally protected. Harrison, finally present. Evan, a steady presence who felt like the first safe place she'd known in years. But as Grace rested her forehead against the incubator's glass, whispering Noah's name, a nurse approached them with a clipboard and an uneasy expression. "There's something you need to know," she said quietly. "The police are here. They have new information about Preston Holloway." Grace stiffened. Harrison's hand tightened on her shoulder. Evan rose slowly, jaw setting with protective instinct. The nurse continued. "They found something in the apartment, and it changes the entire investigation." Grace felt the air shift before the nurse even finished speaking. Harrison straightened behind her wheelchair, every muscle tight with dread. "Doctor." Evan Mercer took a single measured step closer, positioning himself between her and the doorway, as if danger might walk in at any moment. Grace's pulse quickened. "What? What did they find?" The nurse lowered her voice. "I'll let the detectives explain. They're waiting in a consultation room. They said it concerns both you and your father." Harrison's breath caught. "Me?" The nurse nodded. "Yes, sir." Grace swallowed hard. Preston had already shown she didn't truly know the man she married. But what could he possibly have left behind that involved her father too? Evan placed a gentle hand on her chair. "If you want, I'll go with you." Grace looked up at him at the quiet steadiness in his eyes and felt courage she hadn't had a moment earlier. "Yes, please." They followed the nurse down a hallway lined with framed nature photographs and the soft hum of hospital machinery. Every step felt heavier. Grace kept glancing back toward the NICU doors, wishing she could stay with Noah instead of facing whatever storm waited ahead. The nurse opened a side door. Inside sat two detectives, a woman with sharp, observant eyes and a tall man flipping through a file thick with papers. "Miss Holloway," the female detective said, rising. "Mr. Vale, Dr. Mercer." She gestured to the chairs. "Thank you for speaking with us." Grace settled into the seat beside her father. Evan stood behind them, arms folded, a silent shield. The male detective closed the file. "We need to inform you that your husband is now in custody." Grace felt a ripple of relief, but it didn't settle. Something darker lurked beneath their tone. "For what charge?" Harrison asked. "Several," the detective replied. "Domestic assault, attempted coercion, financial fraud." A pause. But that's not all. The female detective slid a small evidence bag across the table. Inside was a USB flash drive. Grace's stomach twisted. "What's on it?" The detective nodded to the file. Preston kept meticulous digital records of his communications, his contingency plans, and his intentions. "Intentions?" Harrison echoed. "He was planning to frame Grace," the detective said softly. "After the baby was born." Grace blinked, dizzy. "Frame me for what?" "For mental instability," the detective replied. "Enough to claim full custody and cut you out permanently." Her throat closed. Evan rested a steady hand on the back of her chair. "But why?" she whispered. "Why take Noah from me?" The detective inhaled deeply. "Because Preston feared exposure. Not just for fraud, he believed you were close to uncovering a past case connected to your father." Grace stared at her father. Harrison looked down, jaw tight. "What case?" she whispered. Harrison adjusted his cane. "The one that ended my career." The detective continued for him. "Preston discovered documents linking his current firm to the same corruption you tried to expose 30 years ago, Mr. Vale. He knew the moment Grace connected the dots, everything would collapse." Grace's breath trembled. "So he didn't marry me because he loved me?" "No," the detective said gently. "He married you to monitor and control you." Harrison flinched, guilt rippling across his face. The male detective added, "We also discovered a hidden home camera, one Preston installed without your knowledge. All footage is now evidence." Grace's throat burned. "He watched me? All the time?" "Yes." Her hands shook so violently she tucked them beneath her thighs. "I should have protected you," Harrison whispered, voice breaking. "I should have." "It's not your fault," Grace murmured, though her heart ached. She had been a chess piece in a game she never knew existed. The detective cleared her throat. "There's more." Grace looked up, exhausted. "More?" "We reviewed the live stream recorded by Sienna Clark. It's already circulating online. Public pressure is rising, and Preston's firm is panicking." "Good," Harrison muttered. "But the video also includes audio of something he said right before the assault," the detective added. "Something important." She clicked a small recorder. Preston's voice crackled through the speaker. "If she finds out about Vale, we're done. Don't worry, once the kid is born, she's out. Permanently." Grace covered her mouth, choking back a sob. Evan moved closer, his hand landing reassuringly on her shoulder. The detective stopped the recording. "This proves intent, and it strengthens every charge against him." Grace felt both shattered and strangely vindicated. "So what happens next?" she asked weakly. "We move forward with prosecution," the detective said. "But Grace, you should know we also have enough evidence to subpoena the individuals who threatened your father years ago." Harrison's eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes," the detective said. "Your case can be reopened." Grace stared between the detective and her father. 3 decades of silence. 2 lives torn apart. One truth rising from the shadows. Evan knelt beside her chair, his voice low and steady. "Grace, this is the beginning, not the end." She breathed shakily, absorbing the weight of it all. Her son was fighting for life. Her marriage had been a lie. Her father's past was resurfacing. But something new, something powerful was taking form. Because for the first time in years, Grace wasn't running, hiding, or enduring. She was preparing to rise. And as she met the detective's eyes, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, she said, "Tell me what I need to do next." That night, after the detectives left, the hospital room felt impossibly still. The storm had passed, but debris still littered every corner of Grace's mind. She sat upright in her bed, hands folded protectively in her lap, staring at the window where faint city lights flickered against the glass. Evan lingered near the doorway, refusing to leave until she felt steady enough to sleep. Harrison sat in the corner, shoulders slumped, exhaustion etched into the lines of his face. They were both silent, giving her space to breathe, but space only made the weight heavier. Finally Grace spoke. "He planned everything. My marriage, my pregnancy, my future." Her voice wavered. "He treated me like property." Evan stepped forward slowly. "You were never property. You're a survivor." Grace shook her head. "But I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it until it was too late." Harrison leaned forward, eyes shining. "Sweetheart, Predators hide behind love. They hide behind kindness. Your strength isn't measured by how soon you recognize the danger, it's measured by the fact you survived it. She swallowed hard. But I should have known. No, Evan said gently, you shouldn't have had to. Grace looked down at her hands, bruised, trembling. I trusted him. I thought he loved me. I thought we were a family. The word family fractured something inside her. Harrison stood and moved closer, gripping his cane with one hand, reaching for hers with the other. You have a family, he whispered. It's just not the one you were trapped in. Grace felt tears burn again, but she didn't break this time. Not fully. She was too tired for heartbreak. Too tired for fear. But not too tired for anger. Not anymore. What happens now? She asked. Harrison exhaled. Now you rebuild. And now we face the people who hurt all of us. The idea scared her, but it also lit something inside her. A spark she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. A knock sounded at the door. A nurse peeked in. Sorry to disturb, but your son's oxygen levels just improved. He's stable enough for rest. You can visit him again before the night shift. Relief washed over Grace so hard she nearly collapsed. She swung her legs off the bed with determination. Help me up? Evan stepped forward instantly, offering his arm. The warmth of his hand steadied her. He guided her into a wheelchair as Harrison grabbed a blanket to wrap around her shoulders. The trio walked the quiet hallway together, Grace rolling forward, Harrison supporting her from behind, Evan walking at her side. For the first time, she didn't feel like a victim being carried. She felt like a woman moving toward her future. Inside the NICU, Noah's incubator glowed softly. His tiny body seemed stronger, his breathing steadier. Grace pressed her palm against the glass. Hi, baby. Mommy's here again. A calm settled in her chest. For the first time since Christmas Eve, she felt something new. Hope. Evan watched her with quiet admiration. Not romantic, not yet, but deeply protective. As if he recognized the moment she found her strength again. You're healing, he said softly. Grace didn't look away from Noah. I don't feel healed. That's not what I said, Evan replied. I said you're healing. It's a process, one breath at a time. She let those words settle into her bones. When they returned to her room, the detectives had left paperwork on the side table, statements she needed to sign, documents detailing charges, and a protective order preventing Preston from stepping within 500 feet of her or Noah. Grace stared at the stack. A week ago, she would have been terrified to face any of it. Tonight, she whispered, hand me a pen. Evan passed her one. Harrison stood beside her. She signed every page. Her signature wasn't shaky. It wasn't timid. It was the beginning of her reclaiming her life. When she finished, Harrison rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you know. Grace inhaled deeply. I have to be. For Noah. Evan gave a small, proud nod. And you're not doing it alone. Grace leaned back against her pillows, exhausted but empowered. She looked between the two men who refused to leave her side. Her father, her doctor, her unexpected protectors. And for the first time since her world fell apart, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't ruled by fear, lies, or the man who tried to break her. Because this time, she was rising. And nothing would stop her from rebuilding everything Preston tried to take. 2 weeks passed, and the world outside the hospital continued turning, even as Grace's life mended itself in slow, careful stitches. Noah grew stronger by the day. His oxygen needs decreased. His tiny fingers curled around hers with surprising determination. Grace spent hours beside him, whispering promises of safety and a future free from fear. But outside the NICU's protective glow, another battle brewed. Preston's firm was collapsing. Every major news outlet ran variations of the same headline. Finance executive Preston Holloway under investigation for fraud and domestic violence. Public outrage soared when clips from Sienna's live stream spread across social media. People saw Grace on the floor, pregnant, bleeding, begging for help, while Preston looked on. It was the kind of video that punched straight into the nation's conscience. And it wasn't going away. Still, there was one more step that needed to be taken, one only Grace could lead. The invitation came from Preston's former company, a mandatory shareholders hearing on Fifth Avenue. A boardroom showdown where the firm would publicly address the investigation, the scandal, and the security footage found hidden in the couple's apartment. Grace was asked to attend as the primary victim and witness. She could have said no, but she didn't. She needed closure. She needed truth. She needed the world to see her not broken, but standing. And so, with Noah improving, with doctors assuring her she could leave the hospital for a short period, she agreed. The morning of the hearing, New York was coated in frost. The sky glowed pale blue above Fifth Avenue as Grace stepped out of a black SUV. Harrison supported her on one side. Evan walked on the other, his hand gently touching her elbow to steady her. She wore a simple black wool coat over her recovery clothes. A soft scarf. No makeup except a touch someone at the hospital insisted she accept. She didn't need glamour. She didn't need to look strong. She was strong. Cameras flashed the moment she appeared. Grace, over here. Is it true Preston planned to take your baby? How do you feel being here today? Do you have a message for victims of domestic violence? Grace kept her chin lifted, her breath steady. Harrison glared at anyone who stepped too close. Evan stayed just inches from her, scanning the crowd with quiet vigilance. Inside the skyscraper, they rode the elevator to the 36th floor. The doors opened to a marble hallway lined with executives, some whispering, some avoiding eye contact, all aware their empire was burning. The double doors to the boardroom swung open. There he was. Preston Holloway sat at the long glass table, wrists cuffed to the chair, flanked by two officers. His suit was wrinkled, his face hollow. His eyes, once so calculating, were now frantic as they locked onto Grace. She didn't look away. Sienna sat across from him, shaken but defiant, eyes rimmed with smudged mascara. Her lawyer whispered frantically in her ear. Grace took her seat at the witness table. Harrison sat behind her. Evan moved to stand against the far wall, arms crossed, gaze fixed on Preston like a guardian unwilling to blink. The hearing began. Executives presented the evidence. Fraudulent wire transfers, shell companies, false audits, payment trails that led straight to Preston. And finally, the hidden home footage. Gasps rippled through the room. Grace watched herself on the screen, confused, scared, pregnant, falling onto the hardwood floor. She heard her own cries. She heard Sienna's voice. She heard Preston threatening her. Preston slammed his cuffed fists against the table. "Turn that off," I said, "turn it off." But no one listened. Instead, the chairman looked at Grace. "Miss Holloway, do you wish to make a statement?" She rose slowly. Her legs trembled, but her voice did not. "I want to say one thing," she began, eyes fixed on her husband. "For years, I believed love meant endurance, silence, patience. I tolerated cruelty because I thought I didn't deserve better." Her voice deepened. "But now I understand something. The moment a man raises his hand to the woman carrying his child, he stops being a husband and becomes exactly what Preston became." She inhaled, steady and strong. "My son will never know the man who hurt me, and I will never be afraid again." Cameras flashed, executives murmured, someone clapped softly. Preston sneered. "You think this erases what your father did? You think you're safe?" Harrison stepped forward, voice low and lethal. "She's safer than she's ever been." Officers pulled Preston back as he lunged. The chairman spoke. "This hearing concludes with the unanimous decision to remove Preston Holloway from the company and move forward with full legal cooperation." And just like that, the empire Preston built on lies shattered. Grace didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply turned away, ready to return to Noah, the only future that mattered. As she reached the hallway, Evan caught her gaze. "You did more than survive today, Grace." She exhaled shakily. "What did I do?" "You took your life back." And for the first time, she believed him. Grace expected the courthouse to feel cold, but when she stepped through its doors, it felt strangely warm, alive with murmurs, footsteps, and the quiet hum of justice in motion. Sunlight spilled through the skylights, illuminating the marble floors, as if the building itself wanted to bear witness to what was coming. Today was the arraignment. Today, Preston would face a judge. Today, the truth she'd carried like a wound would finally be spoken aloud. Evan walked beside her, a steadying presence, his hand hovering near her back but never pushing, never guiding, just supporting. Harrison stayed on her other side, chin set with a father's fierce resolve. Every few steps, he glanced down at her, as if to make sure she wasn't fading. But she wasn't fading, not anymore. She entered the courtroom, and the sound inside shifted. Reports whispered, cameras clicked, attorneys shuffled papers. Grace took her seat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution's table. Then she saw him, Preston Holloway. The man she once thought she would grow old with. The man she once trusted with her heart, her home, her future. He looked nothing like the polished executive she married. His hair was unkempt, his jaw dark with stubble, his expensive suit wrinkled and ill-fitting. Cuffed, defeated, he avoided her gaze at first. But when he finally looked up, his eyes burned with something feral. Hatred. Loss of control. Fear disguised as fury. Grace's stomach tightened, but she didn't look away. A bailiff called the room to order. Everyone rose as the judge entered. Preston's attorney immediately launched into pleas for leniency, painting Preston as emotionally overwhelmed and provoked by marital instability. Grace almost laughed. Instability? The only unstable thing in that home had been him. The prosecutor stood, calm, precise, a stack of evidence files in his hands. "With the court's permission, I'd like to present Exhibit A," he said. A monitor flickered on, and suddenly there she was. The live stream footage. Grace on the floor, hands trembling, water pooling. Sienna filming, Preston shouting. Grace crying out for help. And the moment the contraction ripped through her body, her scream echoing off the walls. Whispers spread through the courtroom, horrified, sympathetic, angry. Preston lunged forward. "Turn it off. This is biased. She made herself fall. You don't know what she's capable of." The judge slammed her gavel. "Mr. Holloway, sit down, or you will be removed." Grace felt a tremor run through her, but Evan reached over and touched her hand. Harrison's jaw tightened with barely restrained rage. The prosecutor continued. "We also have audio evidence from a hidden home camera, evidence the defendant installed without his wife's consent." The next clip played. Preston's voice filled the room. "If she finds out about Vale, we're done. Once the kid is born, she's out, permanently." The courtroom froze. A reporter covered her mouth. A juror looked sick. Even the judge shifted, disgust flickering across her face. The prosecutor turned toward Grace. "Miss Holloway, would you be willing to provide a statement to the court?" Evan squeezed her hand. Harrison whispered, "Only if you're ready." Grace stood. Her legs trembled, but her voice did not. "When I married Preston," she began, "I believed in him. I believed in us. I believed in the man he pretended to be. But what I didn't know was that I wasn't a wife to him. I was leverage, a tool, a way to control what he feared most, the truth." She swallowed, then continued. "He didn't break me the night he shoved me. He tried to break me long before that, when he isolated me, tracked me, watched me, used my pregnancy against me. But I survived him, and my son survived him. And I am done being afraid." Every eye in the courtroom remained on her. She inhaled deeply. "I want full restraining orders. I want every charge pursued, not just for me, but for every woman who's ever been silenced by a man who thought he owned her." Silence fell. Then a quiet ripple of approval swept the room. Preston's fury ignited like gasoline. "You ungrateful liar. I gave you everything. You think your new little doctor boyfriend will save you? You think anyone cares?" "Enough," the judge thundered. Officers grabbed Preston as he thrashed, his face red with rage. His mask, once polished and charming, fell away completely, revealing the true man underneath, desperate, cruel, small. For the first time, Grace felt nothing for him. Not anger, not sadness, nothing. Just closure. The judge delivered her decision. Bail denied, charges upheld. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. Applause erupted from the back row, a sound Grace never expected to hear in her defense. She sank back into her seat, shaking. Evan leaned down, his voice warm and steady. "You were extraordinary." Harrison wiped a tear, trying to pretend he hadn't. And Grace, for the first time in years, breathed without a weight on her chest. But as they stepped out of the courtroom and the cameras swarmed, something surprising happened. A representative from the district attorney's office approached Grace with news that would change her life even more. Grace stood in the courthouse corridor, breath still unsteady from the emotional storm she had just weathered. Reporters clustered near the exit, murmuring her name like she had become a symbol instead of a woman trying to hold herself together. Cameras flashed. Microphones stretched, Security kept them back. But the representative from the district attorney's office stepped forward with a gentleness that cut through the chaos. "Miss Holloway," she said softly, "may I speak with you privately for a moment?" Grace exchanged a glance with Harrison and Evan before nodding. They followed the representative to a quieter corner near a tall window overlooking the snow-streaked streets of Manhattan. "There's something you deserve to know," the woman began. "Something your father never told you because he was trying to protect you." Grace's heartbeat quickened. Harrison's jaw tightened, a silent confession forming before he spoke a word. The representative continued, "Your father was never meant to disappear. He was meant to be protected. Judge Harrison Vale wasn't disgraced, he was threatened. He refused to alter a ruling that would have protected the same company your husband worked for. When he refused, they retaliated. We now have enough evidence to clear his name fully." Grace's breath hitched. She turned to her father. "Dad, is that true?" Tears welled in his eyes, tears he didn't bother hiding this time. "Everything I did was to keep you safe. Lorraine begged me to stay away. She believed you'd have a better life without being hunted." He swallowed hard. "I hated it. Every second. But I thought it was the only way." Grace felt her chest tighten, not from fear, but from the enormity of the moment. All the years of distance suddenly made sense. All the shadows in her childhood finally had form. The representative stepped closer. "His reinstatement hearing is already underway. If you and your father are willing, we'd like you both to speak." Grace looked at Harrison. The guilt in his eyes softened under the weight of her forgiveness. "Yes," she whispered. "We'll be there." 2 days later, Grace rolled Noah's bassinet into a sunlit lounge reserved for families of NICU graduates. He had grown stronger, still tiny, still fragile, but breathing easier, grasping her finger with determined force. "Hello, my little fighter," she whispered, brushing his cheek. "You're going home soon." Harrison stepped into the room wearing a new suit, simple, dignified, his posture straighter than she had ever seen. The reinstatement panel had ruled in his favor. His name was cleared, his legacy restored. But none of that compared to the way he looked at Noah, as though he had been given a second chance at fatherhood. "May I?" he asked softly. Grace nodded, heart swelling as she watched Harrison lift Noah gently, holding him as if he were carrying hope itself. The door opened again. Evan entered quietly. He held a wrapped blanket in his hands, blue, soft, embroidered with Noah's name. "I thought he might like this for his first night home," Evan said, voice warm. Grace felt heat rise in her cheeks. Even after everything, she wasn't ready for romance, not yet, but there was no denying the comfort Evan brought her, the steady ground he offered when hers shook. "Thank you," she said softly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You did something incredible, Grace. You saved your son, you saved yourself, and you exposed something that will protect other women too." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I wasn't alone." "No," Evan agreed, "but you were the one who stood." Their eyes held, a quiet understanding flowing between them. A knock on the door interrupted. A social worker peeked inside. "Miss Holloway, we have the final paperwork ready. We need your signature for Noah's birth certificate." Grace exhaled slowly. A new name, a new beginning, a chance to erase the shadow Preston left behind. She took the clipboard. At the line marked "Father," she paused. "Do you want me to fill that in?" the social worker asked gently. Grace looked at Noah, then at her father, her real father still holding him with trembling joy. Then at Evan, whose steady presence had become something she could lean on. She smiled softly. "Yes," she said. "Write Harrison Vale." Harrison froze. "Grace," he whispered, voice cracking, "are you sure?" She wiped her tears. "You fought for me when it mattered most. You stood by me when I thought I had no one. Noah deserves to know the name of a man who protects, not harms." Harrison bowed his head, unable to speak. The social worker filled in the form. Noah Vale. A name born from truth, from survival, from love restored, not broken. Later, as Grace prepared to leave the hospital, Evan walked her to the elevator. Snow drifted gently outside the tall windows, the city shimmering with possibility instead of fear. "When you're ready," Evan said, "I'd like to take you and Noah out for a real meal, not hospital food. Something peaceful, warm, maybe a little celebratory." Grace laughed softly, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. "I'd like that," she said. "Just one step at a time." Evan nodded. One step at a time. The elevator doors slid open. Grace pushed Noah's bassinet inside, Harrison beside her. She looked back at Evan one last time, and for the first time since her world collapsed, she felt not survival, but the beginning of a beautiful life. A life where she wasn't owned, or controlled, or afraid. A life where she was loved truly, gently, freely. As the doors closed, she whispered, "We're going home." So that's the end of our story. And if you're still here with me right now, my friend, it means something inside this journey touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you of someone you love. Maybe it reminded you of a pain you once carried. Or maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Grace's story teaches us something powerful. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Grace didn't choose what happened to her, but she chose what came next. And that choice changed everything. Life will break us in unexpected ways, but it also offers unexpected hands to help us rise again. A new beginning can come from a place you never saw coming. If this story touched you, even a little, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who may need encouragement tonight, and subscribe so you never walk these emotional journeys alone. We're building a community here, one heart, one story at a time, and I'm truly grateful you're part of it.